Hey, true believers, do you love politics? Do you love comic books? Well, Superhero Politics is for you. It combines the comical nature of politics and the political nature of comic books. Join us, like, share, and experience the world of comics and politics in a way that you never have before. This is Superhero Politics, and I'm your host, Michael Holmes. DNC face off in an epic superpower battle for the soul of the nation. Superhero Politics. Let's get up and away. Welcome, everybody. My name is Michael Holmes, and this is Superhero Politics. You may be asking, what is superhero politics? Well, the concept came to me because, I love two things: comic books and politics. And so when thinking about the concept of politics, I looked at things through the lens of the typical comic book archetypes: heroes and villains, nefarious plots, despots bent on world domination, and applied that to politics. Those are all themes in comic books. But if you look at our politics today, it seems cartoonish. I mean, there are clear setups in our societies for the classic heroes and villains type. You look at how the parties have separated and their policies are played out across social media, across traditional media, and everyone is set up in their own little camps: the Justice League versus the Legion of Doom, the Fantastic Four versus Doctor Doom and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, X-Men versus the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It's all set up for these classic battles. You've got politicians on both sides who fit the mold of classic heroes and villains throughout comic books. And we look at who is in charge of our government today. And so we look at this setup, this juxtaposition between the two parties and how they've kind of comported themselves over, definitely the expanse of my life. And you see this, and depending on what political lens you look through, you feel as though either the one side is the villains and you're the hero, and oddly enough, both sides see the opposite side as the villain. But we're gonna talk about how that kind of has played out, how that's been set up, and how the media structure has kind of set that in motion for us to see things based on policy, based on politicians, and how they've been portrayed throughout history. So today, the president of the United States is Donald Trump, who, by any stretch of the imagination is the classic cartoonish villain archetype. I mean, if you go back in comics, there have been plenty of times where billionaires have assumed power, and challenged the status quo, challenged what seems to be a takeover of America. And Superman Lex Luthor actually became president. Now, what's the difference between Lex Luthor and Donald Trump? Lex Luthor actually divested from LexCorp, and Trump never did. So if you're keeping score, Donald Trump is less ethical than a comic book supervillain. So it's a strange dichotomy that we live in today, where we have such clearly defined archetypes of heroes and villains. So we're going to talk about today the RNC and the DNC Republican national conventions and the Democratic national conventions who took place over the last 2 weeks, and kind of what that means as we head towards 2020 election cycle. And we're in the midst of a global pandemic, in the midst of economic uncertainty and near depression, social unrest, violence, on the backdrop of massive inequality and racial strife, and just how the parties fit in this, and the two central figures in this political political battle. So on one hand, you have Joe Biden, who is kind of been a mainstay over the history of Democratic politics. He's been a senator, he's been a vice president, he's been around for so many decades fighting the good fight. And then you have this insurgent in Donald Trump, who out of nowhere came in and bent the Republican Party and the conservative movement to his will. He kind of warped the political reality around him in a way that we've never seen. And so as we look at his entrance or his emergence on the scene, the media's had a tough time figuring out how just to play him, how just to cover him, because with such an unpredictable nature of a candidate, of a president, of a leader. It's been tough for the media to define how they want to cover it. And so as we move forward to 2020, we move forward to November, we're going to draw some distinctions between Joe Biden and Donald Trump as the hero and the villain. So let's get started with Joe Biden. So a lot of people will say, and this is Joe Biden's kind of his campaign tag is, we're battling for the soul of America. You can look at Donald Trump and all of his failures and, some of his personality quirks and say that, he's as immoral as the Joker. And so when we take a look at how he's covered in the media, a lot of times the media won't even they've kind of settled into this understanding that the Republican Party has leaned into being the villain. They've leaned into it. They've decided that we're not going to compete on the level of policy versus policy. We're not going to compete on the level of candidate versus candidate. We're going to have this. We're going to have this master plan to, through whatever means necessary, take down what they see as a more powerful entity. It's almost like when you look at Lex Luthor versus Superman. Superman is this godlike figure who is imbued with all kinds of fantastic powers, literally could take over the world in a matter of hours. And then here's Lex Luthor, a normal human, rich, powerful, but just a human. And so if you look at how America views the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, and you can kind of see how that kind of dichotomy has set up. The media doesn't even see the Republican Party as a governing figure. They don't see them as a governing party, because anytime something happens, it's always, why aren't Democrats doing something to stop Republicans? It's always, well, Republicans are flouting the rule of law. Why aren't Democrats stopping them? Republicans are, Reagan and Iran-Contra. Why didn't Dems do more? George W. Bush and Iraq. Why didn't the Democrats stop them? Trump is violating the Hatch Act by using the White House as a political prop. What are Democrats going to do? They're not even asking why are Republicans doing this. They're not even demanding that the Republicans stop. It's kind of like how Gotham media covers the Joker. Joker would murder an orphanage full of kids. They wouldn't ask his motivation. They would never say, the Joker must stop this carnage. It was always, how is the Dark Knight gonna stop the Joker? Because there was just this tacit acknowledgement or this explicit acknowledgement that the Joker was just an agent of chaos, that he was just hell-bent on destruction, and that was his place in society. And it really came down to just this kind of force of nature that existed in opposition to the hero. And you can see that in the media because when we look at what's happening in Kenosha, and my heart goes out to the family of Jacob Blake, who was shot 7 times by an officer in the back at close range as he tried to break up a fight and get back to the car where his 3 sons were waiting for him. You see that in the media, and you see the media calling on Democrats to denounce the violence that, as a result of the protest that goes on in the city, that went on in Kenosha. There are pundits, there are traditional media figures saying, why isn't Joe Biden decrying the violence? Why isn't he out there demanding that the violence and the rioting stop? Where are the calls for Donald Trump to denounce police brutality? Why isn't the media saying to the Republican Party, you've placed yourself squarely on the side of law enforcement, but yet you don't call them to account to stop the things that precipitate the riots and the protests? The reason that is because the media has accepted the fact that the Republican Party is not a governing party, that the Republican Party is not going to, stand up to any of those natures of kind of the worst natures of this country. They're going to embrace it. Like they've accepted the fact that when it comes down to chaos and things like that, they expect the Republican Party to be on that side of the ledger. They expect them to play the role of villain. So looking at them and saying, why aren't the Republican Party accountable for what's happening? They look at the Democrats and say, well, it's up to you to stop them. Why aren't you stopping them? What are you going to do when Trump flouts the rule of law? What are you going to do when he breaks a presidential norm? How are you going to do it? Because the onus to save society is always on the hero. And so when you look back at the last 50 to 75 years of politics in this country, what you see as you used to have this really unclear distinction of who is the hero and who is the villain. So if you look back, the Democrats, in the 1960s, the Democrats emerged as a former party of the Confederacy. Many members of the Democratic Party were former members of the KKK, and you'll hear this talking point a bunch from Republicans and conservatives. The Democrats are actually the party of the KKK, and that's a kind of a fraught history that Democrats have. And so, as the civil rights era emerged, what you started to see is a little hardening on both sides into this new role. So when LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act into law, what you had is this great exodus of kind of white flight from the Democratic Party over to the Republican Party. And, you'll hear it a lot. Some of these, pundits will say that didn't happen, and this was fake, and blah, 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 and all that other stuff. But, that's clearly what happened, because the elections started to go from the Democrats clearly winning the South, all the southern states, all the former Confederate states, to the Republicans winning those states. And so what happened is now you have an influx of minorities into the Democratic Party. And so the Democrats started to craft their new platform around inclusion and diversity and, essentially truth, justice, and the American way. And so when you stake that claim that you're going to be the defenders of the melting pot of society, what is the juxtaposition to that? What do the Republicans do? Well, the Republicans were left with essentially white people. They were essentially left protecting the remnants of white supremacy and white privilege. Now, I'm sure that's not what they wanted, but if you can't win elections, what are you going to do? And this is the chase for power. And I think this is what corrupted the Republican Party. Now, every villain has an origin story. Every villain has an origin story. Like every hero has an origin story. So when we talk about how the Republican Party became the villain of the day, like how they became the villain of today, we think about classic characters like Magneto. We think about classic characters like Victor Von Doom. We think about classic characters like Lex Luthor, and we think about classic characters like Dr. Octopus. We think about all these characters, and we think about how they came to be villains. Like it was always some tragedy that forced them into being, to viewing society as something that needed to be bent to their will. Some of them will say, I am coming to restore order because if I don't rule with an iron fist, then society will crumble. And they actually believe that their villainy is righteous. And so I think that's kind of what Republicans are believing today, that the things that they're doing for a righteous reason. And they think, well, if we continue to mold society in our vision, then we'll bring order to this kind of wild society that we have now, where these minorities and immigrants and everyone are popping up and causing chaos with the good white people of this country. And so as we have this hardening of ideologies of heroism and villainy, everybody just kind of settled into it. Like there was no way to like push back. Like there was almost this acknowledgement from both sides that says, you know what, we're going to play this game the way this game is shaken out. Republicans leaned into it. Republicans said, you know what, if I can't attract minorities, then I'm going to lean in to this white power. And what it gave them, almost like in this kind of Zen-like, in this kind of Zen-like, awakening, was they found a power. They unlocked a secret power that allowed them to fight back against a very powerful entity in what the Democrats had become. So the Democrats absorbed. So if we talk about heroes and how they are often empowered, a lot of times some of that what you see is that they're they're either born with that power or they absorb that power, or they're given that power. Spider-Man was bitten by, a radioactive spider, and he was imbued with powers that, that gave him the, fantastic spider-like powers. Superman absorbs the rays of the yellow sun. It activates his Kryptonian cells and it makes him, the most powerful hero on the planet, or some say in the universe. And so the Democrats absorbed all of these new powers: black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, immigrants, LGBT, women voters. Like they absorbed all this new power, and so they were able to pull together this, X-Men like, Fantastic Four like, Justice League like power, this team, to power themselves to victory. So when faced with that type of power, what do? You lean in to villainy. So Republicans have taken the tact that if we need to break norms, we're going to break norms. If we need to attack democracy, we'll attack democracy. If we need to undermine the rule of law, we'll undermine the rule of law, because they feel completely justified, because they have convinced themselves that their cause is righteous and they are fighting against a system that is skewed against them. You'll hear this a lot from conservatives. You'll hear this a lot in conservative media, that everybody is biased against them. They don't have a choice because they can't get a fair shake. They can't get honest coverage. And so when Donald Trump uses the White House in a clear violation of the Hatch Act to accept the nomination for the Republican Party, the media just goes, what do you expect? However, years before, Barack Obama apparently made a call from Air Force One, and the media was apoplectic. Literally, the New York Times ran a full-page front ad when Al Gore made a call from the White House. Catherine Sebelius, in I think 2011 or 12, literally mentioned Barack Obama's name at a sanctioned event. She had to go back, apologize, recast the event as a personal event, and then pay for all of the expenses and travel for her and her team to be there. Because the media had such a different standard for who they consider the hero versus who they consider the villain. You want another example? 2016 election. Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, been in the public eye for 30 years. Been investigated from stem to stern. Donald Trump, been in the public eye for almost as long. Been investigated from stem to stern, but never through the political lens. So now you have this convergence. Donald Trump comes on the scene as a candidate. No one expects him to win, but as he makes his way through the Republican primary, the scrutiny on Donald Trump, someone who's never even been elected student council president, is so light and so minimal. What is your policy for healthcare? Oh, it's going to be terrific. You're going to love it. It's going to be fantastic. What's the headline? Donald Trump has fantastic healthcare policy. Hillary Clinton has to come out and detail How many is it going to cover? Who is it going to affect? How are you going to pay for it? Both candidates were under investigation by the FBI. The only candidate that it was revealed was under investigation by the FBI was Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump literally had 25 women accuse him of sexual assault or worse. He was caught on tape admitting to committing sexual assault, and literally nobody cared. Hillary Clinton sent some innocuous emails, and it buried her campaign. It buried her chances for president. The media covered it incessantly. I think there was something ridiculous number of about 18 or 19,000 articles written on Hillary Clinton's emails. It became such a joke that there were memes flying around the around the internet just said butter emails. Butter emails. Anytime that you got into a Twitter debate with someone who was supporting the Republicans, it was always, but what about Hillary Clinton's emails? Where are those emails? Donald Trump literally went out and asked a foreign country to hack and find those emails and release them to the public. As a matter of fact, it happened on the day that the infamous tape, Access Hollywood tape, was released to the public, and it just automatically obliterated that from the news cycle. Why? It's because the standard for Hillary Clinton in the Democratic Party, who the media sees as the responsible governing party, the party of heroes, is so much higher than what they see for the Republican Party and Donald Trump, who they have cemented as the villain. You don't expect the villain to be ethical. You don't expect the villain to be righteous. You don't expect the villain to follow the rules. But you do expect that for the hero. You do expect the hero to do everything right. I said earlier that when the Joker murders an orphanage full of kids, people will express outrage, but no one will say, my God, Joker, stop this carnage. Why? Because you just expect the Joker to do carnage. But if, say, Batman was to break a crook's arm, apprehending him, it would be, oh, the Dark Knight has gone too far. And this is what our politics looks like today. Joe Biden will face the same impossible standard. We're in the midst of a global pandemic that has largely been completely fumbled by this president and this administration. We're in the midst of an economic crisis that has largely been precipitated by the failure of this administration and this president. We're facing right now social unrest, racial strife like we haven't seen since the 1960s, largely because of the stoking of these things by this president from the moment he emerged on the scene. And what is the media doing? Asking why the Democrats aren't doing more to stop him. What are the Democrats going to do in the House? Are they going to impeach? Are they going to sue? Are they going to do these things? Why? It's because we expect the heroes to ride in and save the day. The media will never admit this. The media will never admit that this is how they see the parties. But if you look at their coverage, it's as clear as if you had X-ray vision. You literally can see how the media approaches covering these parties. And this is the essence of superhero politics. This is why I started this, is because, you look at what's happening, and I've read, I don't know, 80 or 90,000 comic books in my life. And I've also been around politics for most of my life, 30 plus years now. And so you look at these two genres and how they kind of bleed together. And you look at how, the media fixes itself in this. And so, you have the Lois Lane types and the J. Jonah Jamesons and the Daily Planets and the Daily Bugles, CNN, MSNBC. You have the Fox News. All these kind of play out as kind of these satellite entities that, support the heroes and the villains. The Legion of Doom on the right, and, MSNBC on the left. And so, what we're seeing is, this has become a battle. When the Legion of Doom and the Justice League have a battle in the heart of Metropolis, things are destroyed. Things are just wiped out. And right now, our country is the battleground for these two superpowers. And make no mistake, we're in between two superpowers. And we're dealing with the fallout. Now, the 2020 election is coming up, and it'll be one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Because there's so much hinging on it. In a lot of comics, you see that, when the villain emerges on the scene, they grow in power. They get stronger and stronger and stronger until they are stopped by the heroes. And so Donald Trump has essentially been empowered, and his power continues to grow. Like the normal restraints of society that generally shackle or contain a president, he's broken those. He's kind of shattered those. He's not beholden to any standard. He's not, he's not going to play by any of the rules that typically govern society. In a lot of ways, he's, like the Mixtus of politics. He's just going to cause chaos. And so if Democrats don't find a way and the American people don't reject him in 2020, he'll almost be all powerful. It's almost like he's assembling all the Infinity Stones on the Infinity Gauntlet, and he's just missing the Soul Stone before he's able to warp reality forever. And so what are Democrats going to do? Can they amass enough power to stop him? Can they marshal the forces? Can they open the portals and bring all the heroes there to face Thanos and defeat him on November 3rd? That remains to be seen. Right now, it looks like he's in a weakened state. It looks like his power's been drained. It looks like he's, facing certain defeat. But that's not clear. That's not clear. And so the overconfidence of the hero has often been their downfall. And so, as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris head toward November, how will they continue to build on kind of this surge of energy? Like, it's like Superman getting a sun dip. Like, he flies into the sun and he's super powered. He's amped up to be able to continue to fight against doomsday. Can they maintain the power? can they marshal the forces? Can they call in the rest of the heroes to be able to face this daunting, this villain, this mad titan in Donald Trump? So, this election is about a clash of powers, about a clash of wills. It's really about a clash of realities. This is about a clash of realities. This is about a clash of political realities. And one will emerge as the reality for America. And who will win? Who's going to be able to amass enough power to be able to reshape this country? The hero or the villain? All that remains to be seen. But we'll come back in a little while, and we'll look at what happens post RNC. We'll come back and we'll look at what bounces that each of them get. We'll look at polling. We'll look at all the kind of early warning signs of where this election is heading. But that's kind of the idea for superhero politics. Why, I decided to do this podcast and put this together, just to kind of merge two things that I love and talk about politics in kind of a fun, unique way. But as we close out today, we received some pretty amazing news, even for 2020 standards. Chadwick Boseman, who is known to the superhero world as King T'Challa of Wakanda, or Black Panther, died today at age 43. A 4-year battle with colon cancer. And he was amazing talent. He brought life to so many iconic characters. I mean, I used to joke when he first hit the scene, like, this guy's agent does not get paid enough. Whatever he's making, his agent does not get paid enough. Because he broke on the scene as Jackie Robinson. He played Thurgood Marshall. He played James Brown. And then to end up bringing life to one of the greatest representatives of Black comic books in the Black Panther to the screen, it was just an amazing kind of introduction, to art. He brought an authenticity to the character, and we never seen Black Panther in live action. We'd never seen the character portrayed in anything but animation. But to portray not only a hero but a king, a complex character who walked the line between being a hero for the world and protecting his kingdom. Chadwick Boseman was, a unique talent in the fact that, he took on this role that had never been portrayed, and he gave it life. I remember coming out of the theater and seeing an elderly white lady who, man, if she was under 100, I would be shocked. And she said, "You're going to love this movie. It is awesome." The character crossed so many different lines. It touched so many people. And it introduced so many people to the royalty of T'Challa. And I honestly think that you can armchair quarterback this, and you can look back and you can say, oh well, this actor is this and this actor is that. But it's not often that you say that this role was written for somebody. But I honestly believe that this role was written with Chadwick Boseman in mind. My heart goes out to his wife and his family. My heart goes out to his Marvel family. I know they are heartbroken. My heart goes out to the comic book community. This is a devastating loss in just a year of devastating losses. So as we continue to navigate this pandemic landscape, we lift up the Boseman family. We lift up America. We lift up the 180,000 people who have lost their lives due to COVID. We lift up the millions of people who are struggling right now with job loss and financial insecurity. We lift up the millions of people who are, dealing with, dealing with the loss of loved ones that they couldn't, be with. Thousands, I should say, not millions. And we lift up the families of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and now, unfortunately, Jacob Blake. This country is facing a unique challenge, and we need some heroes. And we need heroes to step forward to help us save the day. In comic books, there's nothing less permanent than death. We've seen it time and time again. Characters die and they come back. Superman came back. Jean Grey has come back so many times in X-Men from death. Ra's al Ghul literally has a pit, a resurrection pit called a Lazarus pit to bring him back. So death is not permanent in comic books. Unfortunately, life is not a comic book. And as we lose heroes in life like John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and now Chadwick Boseman, we need a new generation of heroes to step up. I look at these millennials today and I think about how they're so unafraid to face power. I like to call them young justice. So hopefully as our heroes fall, other heroes will rise. So true believers, as we sign off for today, just know that, with great power comes great responsibility. Up and away. What's going on, true believers? Thank you for your continued and growing support. If you're enjoying the content that we're producing here on Superhero Politics, I ask that you subscribe anywhere that you can find podcasts. That means iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, You can find us at Buzzsprout and also on our social media at Superhero Politics on Twitter, at Superhero Politics on Facebook, Superhero Politics on Instagram, and Superhero Politics on TikTok. Like, share, join us, and if you would have any topics that you would like to share or just questions that you would like to ask me, you can send your emails to superheropolitics@gmail.com, and we'll do an episode where we answer your questions. Thank you for your continued support, and remember, always speak truth to power.